That's not a lot better. How's that? I'm just going to go with this. This isn't quite right first time with this iPad. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Great to be here and to have a chance to talk with you and to follow two really interesting summaries and overviews raising all kinds of great issues. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit specifically about some K12 issues. First, to pick up on something that Darryl said at the beginning about what's happening across government, and then to go into some depth about some NSF issues. So let's see if this shows. It's okay enough, I think. I wanted to tell you a little bit about a project that a number of us have been working on across 13 federal agencies over the last several years, and that is the production of a National Science and Technology Council Committee on STEM Education 5-year strategic plan across government. And you may have heard something about this. It was released last spring. And I wanted to clarify where we are with this. It's a very exciting area of work because it's bringing together colleagues across multiple agencies who are committed to STEM. And the plan lays out 5 priority areas within STEM. And for each priority area, there are coordinating or pairs of coordinating agencies. And so what's happening right now is a number of subgroups are in place looking at these areas, and I'll just tell you quickly what they are. And engineering is a discussion within each of these, although one thing we'll be looking for in the next year or so is how to strengthen the engineering component. So improving STEM instruction, that's a K12 focus primarily. The U.S. Department of Ed leads that, and I think you're scheduled to hear from Kamsi McAdams later in your program. So she can tell you a bit about what that's involving, but basically bringing together people across all of the agencies to figure out how we can coordinate more fully our investments in K12, particularly in the area of teacher preparation, teacher continuing education. Second is about increasing and sustaining youth and public engagement in STEM. This is an important area for the engineering community, I think, because although we're talking a lot about what goes on in formal K through 12 schooling, there are also great opportunities to engage with STEM outside of school. And you've heard a bit from Tom about Makers Movement and all kinds of other places where kids can engage in early engineering experiences apart from formal schooling. So this engagement area is being led by the Smithsonian Institution. Enhancing the STEM experience and undergraduate STEM education is being led by the National Science Foundation. Graduate education, focusing primarily at first on graduate fellowships, being led by NSF and NIH jointly. And then the 5th priority focus for this work is on serving groups that have been historically underrepresented in STEM, and that's being undertaken by one of the subcommittees of this Committee on STEM Education. So stay tuned for periodic reports from these groups as they work across agencies and with stakeholders going forward to take a look at STEM education issues generally and engineering in particular. I wanted to turn then to some specifics about engineering education from the perspective of the National Science Foundation and to highlight, first of all, some challenges that we have identified, my colleagues and I in the Directorate for Education and Human Resources, that could be unifying themes as we think into the future about our funding, our investments, our programmatic focus. First of all, the undergraduate engineering curriculum, as my engineering colleagues assure me, is strongly affected by constantly emerging technologies, and therefore you face interesting challenges about what technologies to begin to drop to the wayside and which new ones to pick up. And these are interesting pedagogical and resource challenges. Secondly, the need to keep pace in educating engineers to produce new technologies, meaning entrepreneurship education, innovation education, interesting challenges that may be somewhat unique to the engineering fields. Third, specifically involving teaching students to become innovators and thinking about and designing experiences that lead them to be ready for that. And then the very serious issues of diversity and attracting people to engineering at an early age that have been identified repeatedly. I was also thinking that instead of just listing challenges, I ought to list a few places where congratulations are due to the engineering education community, and so I will. And these are long-standing practices that go on in the preparation of engineers, but that have not necessarily spread to the preparation of others in STEM and yet might be quite useful. Getting students to work together in teams very early on authentic problems is something that you're very good at as a community, and yet we haven't really picked that up very well in other areas of STEM, and we could. Performance assessment, of course, I suspect, driven in part by ABET, but in general, this notion of valuing what people know and are able to do becomes a really important part of preparing people for careers in STEM beyond engineering. and then integrating the preparation of professionals and all that that entails as you prepare folks for licensure and certification kinds of processes. All of that keeps a very strong focus on workplace needs, the quality of preparation, and the readiness of people for their next stages. And so those are areas where I think your communities have much to offer, and we need to be watching that as well. There's a big assumption underlying the K-12 discussion that I thought we ought to just be clear about. And so the way we have framed it, with my colleagues at least, we've talked about this as follows. By including engineering and design focus in K-12 education, the hope is that more students will pursue engineering majors at the undergraduate level. I think it's worth remembering that this is probably testable, and I suspect there are lots of places where there are kind of before and after ways to look at this. But we would be well if it would do us good if we had very strong evidence accumulating that this actually happens. It helps make the case for a stronger focus on K-12 engineering education. And I wanted to organize the rest of my talk around three different but related questions, I think. Knowing that the National Science Foundation is always interested in the interplay between research and evidence and practical solutions to challenging problems, which involve sometimes designing and testing and implementing models, these three questions might be helpful in imagining how we could look at the place of engineering and design in K-12 education. So the first is about whether engineering and design content can be used to help students learn standard mathematics and science content. Now, why might that be a good idea? Well, mathematics and science are pretty well entrenched in the K-12 curriculum. And so, in fact, this is a strategic way, if we really believe the assumption on the previous slide, it's a strategic way to introduce engineering much more fully if we're able to somehow connect it in productively to the math and science. And in fact, in mathematics, my own area of expertise, it's very clear that we haven't done a great job yet in mathematics education of helping to make mathematics relevant for students or helping to find good applications that will engage them more fully. And so engineering, I think, is a terrific resource for that. The second question has to do with getting really much more clear and much more strategic then about what kinds of K-12 engineering learning experiences will attract students into the pathways for engineering and will attract a diverse set of students. And it's clear that there are many things that are being tried, but we need to know more about which ones work, which ones will make the biggest difference, which ones are the sort of special sauce, secret sauce that will be useful in a variety of settings. And then I'll come back in the end to the policy changes that are needed to incorporate engineering education in K-12, believing that this assumption is where we want to go. So now turning to this first point, just with a little bit more detail, can the engineering and design content be used to help students learn standard mathematics and science? I wanted to highlight a project at Purdue led by Alyssa Panich, which is called Science Learning Through Engineering Design. It's an NSF-funded project, the SLED partnership, part of our Math Science Partnership Program. It's focused on working with grades 3 through 6 teachers who are working to teach science but using engineering design as the approach. And one of their fundamental research questions is, how do elementary and intermediate school students utilize and learn science when engaging in engineering design-based tasks? So these are fairly particular kinds of questions, and if we start to get an accumulation of research that answers some of these questions, it then makes our investments much more strategic and more possible. So that's one example. I think a second question here, this second question, what kinds of experiences will actually help attract diverse students into engineering? There's been a lot of emphasis on providing role models. And so we have many, many great examples of that. There is also this notion of engaging students in engineering-like experiences as a way to help them develop an identity or a possible identity as an engineer, to be able to picture themselves in some way pursuing this career. That's a little different than doing role modeling work. Maybe we need both. Maybe one or the other is more strong for certain groups of students. So again, these become important questions. And I'd cite a couple of examples here that we have funded. One is called the Engineering Ambassadors Program at Penn State University. I don't know you all well, so I'm sure that there are deans and representatives from some of these institutions here, and you will know more about these programs. But the Engineering Ambassadors Program, led by Karen Thole in mechanical and nuclear engineering at Penn State is one that I wanted to cite because it's a professional development program focused on undergraduates. So it basically, as I understand it, prepares undergraduate ambassadors to go out and work with K-12 students, a very common kind of role modeling approach. But this has done this very interesting sort of crossover. Tom had a slide that he went by quickly, something called I-Core at the National Science Foundation. You know about that, and I'm sure Pramod will tell you more about it this afternoon. But this is a program where we're looking to take findings and results that have come through our research-funded projects and bring them out into the market or into widespread use in an entrepreneurship kind of style. Well, it turns out that this project, this Engineering Ambassadors Program, is one of our I-Core for Learning projects that is actually having great success in trying to think about how some of what it's been doing in this project could be spread in wider ways. And they're very focused, as I understand it, on this K-12 outreach. So we'll learn a lot from that project about what you need to do to make the K-12 outreach effective. This is obviously not a good system here. But you know what the questions are. And then the other example I wanted to mention here is the work being done by Glenn Bull and his colleagues at the University of Virginia with the Charlottesville Public Schools and also with the Commonwealth of Virginia as a partner, where they have launched the Buford Engineering Design Academy in a middle school in Charlottesville. Very interesting place. I had the opportunity to visit it. The focus is on advanced manufacturing. It's a lab school working in partnership with Virginia's School of Education and School of Engineering to engage middle school kids and teachers in engineering design. And so very exciting possibilities there to perhaps open up some career pathways. And then the third question is one that we've already heard quite a bit about. The computer science community has been very strategic and planful in trying to focus on K-12 education. And we've heard about these efforts. In part, their theory of action goes sort of like this. There will be huge needs for computer scientists going forward into the future. To get enough computer scientists and to get a diverse enough group of computer scientists, we will need to work at the K-12 level. To get something to happen at K-12, the strategy that folks have been using in computer science is to introduce curriculum into the schools that will engage kids in computer science and at the same time build a teaching core that will be able to deliver that curriculum. And so that's the strategy of CS10K and a number of other related efforts. It occurs to me that for engineering, one might consider a strategy that would have several different elements. One is, these days with common standards being used across many states, it's probably quite important for engineering to have a place in standards, because what is in standards is actually what gets taught. And if you're not aware, the next generation science standards actually include a number of engineering standards within them. I'll read you one. It's a middle school standard. It says, by the time students reach middle school, they should have had numerous experiences in engineering design. The goal for middle school students is to define problems more precisely, to conduct a more thorough process of choosing the best solution, and to optimize the final design. So with those kinds of standards starting to show up now on teachers' agendas, there's an interesting opportunity for a very concerted effort around engineering education K-12. A second focus needs to be curriculum. So if standards exist, but teachers don't have resources and tools to use to actually convey those standards, then it won't really get very far. And so again, the National Science Foundation funds a fair bit of this kind of work. To have teachers who are prepared. We have a nice example at You Teach Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin, trying to engage students in preparing to be teachers of high school engineering courses. It's just terrific to hear about the AP progress and discussion and contemplation of this as a possibility. The computer science folks also focused on AP as a way to give real presence in schools. And then related to that, as you've heard, courses that actually count toward graduation make a difference, as well as such things as teacher certification policies in states and whether engineering teachers actually have a credential that they can achieve in a state. So some sort of a systemic approach to the policy levers would probably be an important part of a national effort to engage, to introduce engineering education at K12 in a sustained sort of way. Wanted to just mention briefly one other report that you might find interesting. This is something that we did, the National Science Foundation, in partnership with the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education. It lays out guidelines, really, for research and development work in education, including research and development work that we think of at NSF as being the building of very early stage design and implementation projects. And so if you're interested and your colleagues are interested in the sorts of expectations that NSF would have for doing this kind of R&D work in education, this is a good resource. Finally, I'll mention several programs in the Directorate for Education and Human Resources. Again, Pramod will tell you more about our undergraduate efforts this afternoon, which are programs that definitely invite and have in their portfolio substantial work in engineering education, K through undergraduate. IUS is the Improving Undergraduate STEM Education that has brought together the STEP 2s and wider programs in 14. If you're familiar with those, but that solicitation is quite open in terms of what can come in, and it can be about the bridge from high school to undergraduate. You know the ATE program, Advanced Technological Education, very strong emphasis within that on advanced manufacturing. DRK12 has a lot of curriculum sorts of projects. ECR is our core research. We have a very robust engineering education research, discipline-based research component there. Advancing informal STEM learning, that's about the out-of-school learning, and again, we see some engineering, but not as much as we'd like there. And iTest, where a number of projects for K-12 students and teachers are based. So, very interested in the area as far as the Directorate for Education and Human Resources goes. Very impressed by the great work already going on, but do know that these are opportunities. I'll also finalize my remarks by talking to you about a document called the STEM Smart Brief, Engineering Emphasizing the E in STEM Education. This was produced by the Education Development Center as a part of a series of projects that series of meetings that we held around the country. We held a workshop on engineering education for stakeholders. And I've brought a few copies, but you can find it under STEM Smart is the main element of the URL. In any case, really exciting opportunities. We at the National Science Foundation very eager to work with you, to visit with your faculty as they have ideas, and to help shape them into fundable projects. Thanks very much.